Hey everyone, this is Nick, and I've been an Android user for most of my life. I've started with the Galaxy Nexus, and I've been using Android up until last year with very few brief iPhone-related stints in between. But Android just doesn't work for me anymore on many different levels. And that sucks, because the alternatives, they're not great. So let's unpack this, and let's unpack this segue to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, and chances are you already know what Squarespace is. But just in case you're new to the internet, Squarespace is a fantastic tool that lets you build your own website. And I'm not talking about a blog, because while you can do that with Squarespace, it also really goes way beyond that. Since I'm currently looking at remaking my website, I can also say that the option to have a members area for my Patreon supporters and YouTube members piqued my curiosity, as did the fact that you can set up an online store in minutes, complete with online payment for a lot of different services, like PayPal or Stripe. Maybe it's time to finally set up my tlestore.com and get on that merch bandwagon like so many other prominent YouTubers have done. And if I didn't already have a logo or a domain name, well, Squarespace could handle that as well. It's an all-in-one solution for your online presence, and it can scale all the way up or all the way down depending on your needs. So if you need a new website, head over to Squarespace/The Linux Experiment and get yourself a 10% discount on your first purchase of a website or a domain name. As always, the link is in the description below. Now, let's begin with the first reason why Android is just not working for me anymore. And that reason is the hardware. And I know, that's weird. I mean, Android has so many hardware choices, right? It's one of the strengths of its ecosystem. You get so many options to pick from. Except, well, if you have preferences that go against the current trends, you do not have much choice at all. My preferences list is relatively small. I want a small phone, around 6 inches or a little bit more than that. I want a high refresh rate display, 90Hz or more, and I want a good camera array that can do video portrait mode, because I use that all the time for hardware reviews. Oh, and also I don't want my phone to be made by a Chinese company. I don't need a flagship in terms of specs and power. I don't game on my phone, I don't do anything super intensive. But the fact is, after using a high refresh rate display, there is no way I'm going back to 60Hz. My laptop is 90Hz, my desktop is plugged into a 100Hz monitor, and at that point, only my TV is 60Hz, and I'm starting to notice. Thankfully, my Steam Deck rarely hits over 40 frames per second, so yeah, that choppiness can be attributed to the deck and not to my TV. Now, for the size, current phones are just way too big. Okay, sure, the iPhone 5 style is just too small nowadays, but we've kinda overcompensated in the other direction, don't you think? Seriously, 6.8, 6.97 inches for a phone? That's ridiculous, that's way too big for a phone. As per the provenance of the phone, Chinese manufacturers are a red flag for me. Pun intended, obviously, yes. Now, it's not paranoia, but every Chinese company is legally required to hand over all information about their users to the Chinese government, which means that if you use their phones with their default Android ROM, their apps or services, or even just their firmware, chances are they're collecting data about you, and that data ends up in the hands of the Chinese government. And if you think that makes me weird, just look at this. Dell is apparently planning to remove every single component or chip made from China from their devices. That's not paranoia, that's being afraid of backdoors that the Chinese government would force onto these chip designing companies. Now, still, this excludes phones from Xiaomi, Oppo, OnePlus, Huawei, and even Motorola, which belongs to Lenovo, which is a Chinese company. And so this basically just leaves us with Samsung and Google, and both are equally unsuitable. I used Samsung phones for a long while. I started on the Galaxy S8, then I had an S9 Plus, then an S10e, then an S21. In between some of these phones, I owned an iPhone 11, but I kept it for less than a year. The form factor was just bad. I ran the default Samsung ROM on most of these, and /E on others. I'll talk about software a little bit later. And I find Samsung phones great. I even miss the curved edges screen. I don't understand why people are piling on it. Curves are always better, and not just for phones. Now, more seriously, if you ever used a curved edge phone, I don't understand how you can prefer flat glass for a gesture-based navigation system like what Android has. Curved edges make that easy. Now, my problem with Samsung is more in terms of reliability. All phones I owned from them had the exact same issue. After about a year, they stopped recognizing my SIM card. At some point, they'll start saying no SIM card inserted, and whatever I do, I can only fix it by rebooting the phone 2 or 3 times in a row, or removing and reinserting the SIM card again and again until it manages to detect it. And it's completely random, which means I can never predict when it's going to happen. Sometimes I'll leave the house with my phone in my pocket, not touching it, and at some point during the day I realize that it just lost every kind of signal. It doesn't know my SIM card is there, and so if anyone has tried to call me, text me, or notify me of anything, I've been in the dark for hours at that point. This is definitely not what you want. At least it's not what I want. I'm tired of it. So Samsung, they're gone. Which basically only leaves Google. And the Pixels are highly rated by some people who used them. But first, and it's very subjective, I find them horrible to look at. That camera bar is ugly as sin, the colors are super bland, the bezels around the screen still aren't all the same width, which triggers me to no end. Maybe I'm difficult, but this thing? That does not look good. This is ugly as hell. And on top of that, the Pixel reliability track record is really bad. First gen had severe performance degradation over time. The second gen had a bad OLED screen that burned in way too quickly, and a super easy to break USB-C connector. The third Pixels were plagued by software issues. The fourth had a bad screen again and an insecure face unlock mechanism. The fifth had huge manufacturing issues with the screen separating from the main body, which means it barely stayed on sale for any length of time. And the sixth Pixel had issues with the fingerprint sensor not working well, the assistant could ghost dial random contacts, there was a screen flicker issue, basically zero quality control on these phones. And as per the Pixel 7, it now looks like the camera glass is spontaneously cracking. Not a great track record, not confidence inspiring at all. And yes, I know it's a collection of issues that not everyone has experienced. But still, manufacturers that sell 10 times, 100 times the quantity that Pixel sold never had that many issues leveled against any of their product generation. So no Pixels for me. But that's just the hardware, and I'm sure I could look hard and long enough and find something that I would enjoy. Actually, I'm pretty sure someone will recommend something in the comments that would fit my needs perfectly. Wanna bet someone recommends me a Pixel 7 Pro, the exact opposite of all I want? But even if I could find a device that fits all my needs, there's the software problem. Android is just messy, there's no two ways about it. Depending on which manufacturer you go with, you won't get the same experience at all. Not the same default apps, not the same app store, not the same settings, not the same look and feel, or even not the same features. Samsung's brand of Android, called One UI, was pretty good in my opinion, with a great design flair, easy to use with one hand, with major controls at the bottom of the screen where they belong, good gesture navigation, and looks-wise it was pretty good. But it's riddled with ads that you cannot remove, especially in their news application. And also it's a mess of duplicate applications that do the same thing. Samsung basically throws 3 ecosystems at you at the same time. Their own, which is shrinking by the day, Microsoft's, which is slowly replacing Samsung services like their photo storage or cloud drive, and Google's, because you have to ship Google apps to get access to the Play Store. Which means that out of the box you get 2 or 3 different apps that do the exact same thing for multiple apps. And you can't really remove them, only disable them, but they're still on your phone. This, people, is what bloatware looks like. bloatware isn't a distro shipping LibreOffice by default, even if you don't need it. Bloatware is a phone manufacturer shipping duplicate or triplicate apps that you cannot delete. And if you go with vanilla Android from Google, then you get something that is way more trimmed down with only Google apps and services. But first, the design is butt ugly again in my opinion, with horrid pastel colors, huge buttons with so much padding, and generally the feeling of using a kid's toy. I really hate Material U as a design system. It's bad with its color choices, it's bad with contrast, it's got bad UX, it's a terrible interface in my opinion. And also, it's all Google services. That's going to be an issue with all Android phones. I de-Googled my life almost entirely. The only thing I use from them is YouTube because I run this channel. Anything else I plucked year after year, replacing with Nextcloud or other online providers that are more private. Going with a Google Pixel or vanilla Android would be a step back in that direction, because even if you don't use all Google services, the OS itself still collects and sends tons of data all the time about you. It would be a huge step back. Which leads us to alternate ROMs. Yes, there's a whole world out there, and a Pixel with Graphene OS would give me a super secure and private experience. But it only works on Pixels, and as I explained, no way I'm buying one of those, not with that track record. Then there's Lineage, or even /E, my favorite ROM, which goes even further than Lineage in terms of removing Google crap, and has a very nice simple aesthetic that I find super pleasing. I mean, it's quite easy to see what they took inspiration from. Yeah, it's iOS basically, and I'm fine with that. I used /E for about a year on a Galaxy S9 Plus, and I liked it. But at the time it wasn't quite ready. Too many apps didn't work because the phone didn't pass the safety net check, and the App Store just lacked a lot of applications. Nowadays, /E is more than ready. It does pass safety net check, at least it did on the Fairphone 4 I tried it on, which means my banking app worked out of the box, with the security features, two-factor authentication and the like. And it has a better app store with access to every single Google Play Store app and purchases and in-app purchases. Although for all paid stuff, you do have to use a Google account, which kinda defeats the whole purpose of a de-Googled ROM, but I guess you could create an empty new Google account to handle that. /E is what I would use if I could find a phone I like to use it on. My Galaxy S21 is in a drawer, and I would love to use that with /E, SIM card problems notwithstanding, but I can't because they don't support it. Most modern flagships aren't supported until a few years after they're out, and sometimes they're never supported. Which means I'm out of luck. I have very few hardware requirements. I only want a phone that's not sold by a Chinese company, that has a high refresh rate display, and is in the under 6.3 inches range. And I cannot find anything that fits, and that would also be able to run a de-Googled private ROM. So there's currently a mismatch between what Android offers and my needs and wants, and that's why I'm ditching Android. Which begs the question, what to use now? And I went for an iPhone, but not because I find it better, it's actually worse in a lot of ways. It's supposedly private, but it collects just as much data as what Google does on Android, only sends it to Apple for use with their ad network on the App Store. The hardware is phenomenal though. I went for the 13 Pro and it puts every other phone I ever used to shame. Stainless steel is just a better material than aluminium. It's hefty, but it's small, it doesn't have rough edges, it's just wonderfully made. Sometimes there's a piece of hardware that just feels right in your hands. I have 4 of those. The Xbox Elite controller, the Steam Deck, my iPhone 13 Pro, and I will not say what the 4th is. But the software, iOS, it's so limited. I don't need 1,000 apps, but I still like to change a few things. And that grid-based home screen sucks. Without any free icon placement, there is no icon packs, no themes, no colors you can change, and notifications on iOS are just worse than on Android. No debating, they're terrible. You either get way too many, or you pack them in a summary that's really bad to interact with. And also there's no always on display if you don't have the latest iPhone model, which is stupid. And how about Linux phones? Well, there's no hardware that fits my needs, and also the OS is just not ready. I do need a few apps that I cannot replace with a website. My banking app, my workout app, the YouTube Studio app, and a few other things. And as long as Linux phones don't have a perfect way of running Android apps to supplement the gaps, there's no way I can switch to any of that. And of course, this is not a critic of Android, it's my own experience. I realize that my specific wants and needs are what are causing the problem here. But still, it means I have to use an OS I don't especially like, and that isn't as private as I'd like, and it sucks. For the time being, Android just isn't working out and Linux phones are not ready. So I have to use Apple hardware. Yay! I'm thrilled. What I'm really thrilled about though is today's sponsor. If you need a new device to run Linux on, stop buying Windows computers and trying to slap Linux on it. Buy from Tuxedo. They make hardware that has been picked and designed specifically to run Linux. And on top of that, they have a big range that will fit every budget and every need. From laptops to desktops, gaming-focused workstations or gaming-focused laptops, or just small, cheaper ultrabooks. They have everything that you might want. And they're all customizable, repairable, upgradable. You can open them up and not lose your warranty. You can slap any distro you want on them. They're just really, really good. So if you need a new device and you want to support Linux development and you want to run Linux on that device, don't buy a Windows computer. Click the link in the description below and buy Linux hardware. So, thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't hesitate to like, to subscribe, to turn on notifications, to write a comment. And if you didn't like the video, well, there's that dislike button. And also tell me why in the comments, it's more polite. And if you want to support the channel, there's a super thanks button underneath this YouTube video. There's a PayPal link in the description. And there are also links to my Patreon memberships and YouTube memberships. By signing up for any of these, you get access to a weekly podcast exclusive to members, and you also get to vote on the next topics that I'll cover on the channel. So, thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!